Alright everyone, it's time for a little bit of a counterpoint to the concept that goofballs like Elizabeth Warren, AOC, Bernie Sanders, who's now literally 80 at this point, they keep saying that we need a wealth tax. Now what that would be is de facto nationalization of property, regardless of what arbitrary threshold it's at, and regardless of whether it is counterbalanced by debt holdings. In fact, the sort of people that you would most want to target with a wealth tax, if you were to say, well, you know, the total debt they have is deducted from, you know, whatever worth we're judging where the threshold is on, it wouldn't affect any of them because they have huge amounts of debt. That's how they established huge amounts of industry. In fact, the government created the problem by issuing virtually zero interest loans to people simply because they had a return in the get-go. Then they buy off a senator or two. It makes it more streamlined, and because their credit rating is better than most nations in the world, they can just keep grabbing up more money and investing it, and as long as they're reasonably structuring it, they can keep growing forever. The taxpayers are fundamentally funding them in so doing, despite the fact that it's all loan-based, it's all debt-based, and therefore a huge bubble waiting to explode in our faces. They get off scot-free. So, my first counterpoint would be that a wealth tax would be nationalization. Let me explain it. Let's say that you put the arbitrary threshold for this wealth tax at $100 million. Now, if a person has $100 million in assets, in net worth, or however you're going to calculate it, that is, I mean, they are rich. It doesn't matter if they don't have a penny in the bank. The assumption is those are rental properties, factories, storefronts, stuff like that. They own something tangible that brings in a return. So now let's say that inbred Jed has done really well, and his net worth is $110 million. That $10 million will be taxed at, in some cases, they're proposing a 90% tax. Now this is a yearly. So after a couple of years, virtually all of it's gone. It means that whatever total net worth threshold has been set up, it would be basically impossible to get anyone beyond that amount, again, unless there was debt involved. Or the government had a bunch of write-offs, which it inevitably would for its donor class base. It would basically just price the smaller players out of the market. What does the Jed do then? Well, he's inbred, so he probably is stupid, doesn't realize he's about to get robbed blind. But let's say that Jed gets an adrenochrome injection, has 30 extra IQ points, and understands tax code more. What's he going to do? Well, he'll jettison that extra $10 million. It's worthless anyway. It's going to be taxed so heavily that there's no reason to grow past that threshold. Jed is more likely to subdivide, if he knows what he's doing, and have somebody else who's vaguely on his payroll as part of a de facto trust that the government will never go after anyway, and just subdivide things. Well, now he's below $100 million. Now he's only got $99 million in assets. He's still dirty, filthy rich. He just doesn't have to pay that wealth tax. What the government would essentially be doing is forcing the liquidation of enormous amounts of physical, tangible property. Rental properties, condo developments, and in some cases entire suburban neighborhoods. Buildings. Fuck, there are singular buildings that are worth $100 million. So people who own office fronts, renting them out. People who have, some like Trump, some with a lot of golf courses. The oil industry comes to mind. Big tech, all these firms. Many of them are worth above the amount that's being spoken of. Now I hear 100 million mentioned, I hear 500 million, I hear a billion mentioned. There are a lot of businesses that on paper are worth more than $100 million. Not that many that are worth more than $1 billion, but they do exist. Here's the problem. Let's say that above $1 billion in net values and in net materials that you could call tangible. Imagine everything above that is taxed at some extra rate. Now, it's already been taxed 3 or 4 times anyway, and these people have still succeeded to do the 0% loan scam that is currently going on. But now let's say you tax it at 50% or 90% or whatever. If I'm Mark Zuckerberg, I don't want to have that much wealth because it's literally just going to get siphoned off, and it's yearly because it's in the tax code. So I'm going to jettison that property. I'm going to do everything that I can to streamline what I've got and make it worth, oddly enough, less. Now, this doesn't mean the tangible asset's gone, but it does mean someone else needs to buy the tangible asset. Otherwise, the factory that used to make books for Amazon is empty, and thousands of people are out of work. The server farm that used to host Facebook ads or whatever is derelict. It's not doing anything. The servers are just sitting there. The rental property is now for sale. Well, nobody's maintaining it in the meantime. Or maybe it has a crew doing that, but who's paying for it? You need someone to own the property to justify having that. What about the rental agreements for businesses and office fronts, for individuals, for people who have apartments and shit? What about those agreements struck with one party and now another party needs to take over? It throws the entire system into chaos. So the first point is that it's de facto nationalization, because guess what? All the other big players that normally would eat up those properties aren't going to be in the game because they had to liquidate theirs too. You'd have hundreds of billions of dollars of derelict apartments, office fronts, condominiums, entire fucking communities would be obliterated. It would crush the economy. In a single year, it would probably cause a Great Depression. You would have twice as much homelessness. The GDP's growth would reverse into hyperspace. It would cripple the U.S. economy, which is why no reasonable people suggests a wealth tax. Here's what we should do, though. Because these businesses are getting all this freebies from the government, and because the government can print funny money and fund whatever it wants, and usually funds the wrong things in so doing, we need a wealth tax on the government. By which, this is sort of tongue-in-cheek. What I'm suggesting is that the government should be capped as per how much wealth it can have in a year relative to the actual total size of the economy. And it should be capped a lot lower than it currently is. They can make do with less. They want every business owner to do that. They want every private citizen to do that. There's $3 trillion in new taxes on the middle and working class hidden in the infrastructure bill, by the way. You're not going to see that report on CNN. What we need to do is just shrink the government. That way more money can be in more hands. By the way, it helps everyone. There's not a single person in society other than a bureaucrat or a government worker or a politician who does worse when you shrink the government. Nobody else. 99% of the population, including very poor, middle class, relatively rich, fantastically rich, they all do better. By the way, it'd be a more fair system anyway. Why don't we stop giving 0% loans, constantly trying to stimulate growth when it's just not necessary? Why don't we extend those loan capabilities to smaller investors? But the thing is, their credit score is not A++ because they haven't made it yet, but they can't make it until they get the loan. So they have to suck the cock of a rich person, work for them for a while, make their fortune, and then they can branch out and subdivide. It's interesting how anti-meritocratic the system really can work. The one meritocratic, more capitalistic part of it is slowly being strangulated, which is the internet. Why do you think I've managed to make a living? Not because I'm capable of getting up at 8 o'clock every morning and going and walking people's dogs or something like that. Not without way more caffeine than I'm currently drinking that I wouldn't be able to afford probably. We need a wealth tax on the government. The government's got too much money. We're sitting here talking about, well, the billionaire class is being greedy. They're sitting on billions of dollars. Well, that doesn't mean they're Uncle Pennybags with silos full of gold. The government's greedy. It's sitting on limitless money. It can print as much as it wants, and yet it's not loaning to the poor, Bernie. So we need to tax them more. They're being greedy. Take the money from them, put it back in the pockets of the poor and the working class and the middle class and stuff. Everyone's happy. You gave the middle class and the workers more money. Doesn't this fucking solve the problem that the so-called progressives keep whining and bitching about? Yeah, the billionaires got a little bit back too. Look, if you're already paying no taxes, you didn't get much of an extra return now, did you? No, you just fattened up. You grew from the middle out. That's how to do it. Shrink the fucking government, shrink taxes accordingly. It's as simple as that. That's about all. Peace out.